At his new job, tending the gardens of a sprawling villa owned by a millionaire, Michael Reed, a dedicated gardener in his early 50s, noticed a small girl watching him curiously from behind the glass windows. He was surprised to learn that the wealthy owner, Andrew Blackwell, had a daughter, yet strangely he had never seen her set foot outside the house. The moment Michael finally got a chance to speak with the girl, what she confessed made him realize that something terrible was happening behind those walls. He knew he had to act fast. Before we dive into this gripping story, please share where you're watching from today, and if you enjoy this tale, don't forget to subscribe. The gentle breeze of early spring whispered through the meticulously manicured gardens of Blackwell Mansion. Michael wiped a bead of sweat from his brow as he carefully trimmed the overgrown bushes lining the property's expansive grounds. Above him, the sky was a patchwork of soft clouds with glimpses of blue, a welcome respite from the harsher weather of recent weeks. With practiced precision, his pruning shears snipped away at errant branches in a rhythmic cadence. Michael had been working at the mansion for nearly 4 months, and the vast gardens had become a familiar canvas for his horticultural artistry. While he worked, he couldn't help but reflect on how fortunate he felt to have landed this particular job. The sound of tires crunching on gravel drew Michael's attention away from his task. He straightened his back, protesting slightly after being hunched over for so long, and turned to see a sleek, black luxury car pulling into the circular driveway. The vehicle came to a stop in front of the grand entrance, its engine purring softly before falling silent. From the driver's seat emerged Andrew Blackwell, the millionaire owner of the estate, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke volumes of his wealth and status. As he stepped out, his polished leather shoes gleamed in the dappled sunlight, and his eyes met Michael's across the lush lawn. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed," Michael called out, raising a hand in greeting. "Beautiful day for some gardening, isn't it?" Andrew's face broke into a warm smile as he approached the gate, relaxed and confident. "Indeed it is, Michael. I'm glad you could make it out today. The garden's been looking a bit wild after a month without your expert touch," Andrew said with a chuckle, gesturing to the overgrown foliage. "You're not wrong, sir. There's quite a bit to be done, but I'm grateful that the cooler weather makes the work much more pleasant." As Andrew drew closer, Michael noticed faint lines of stress around his eyes, barely noticeable beneath his friendly demeanor. The millionaire ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, his gaze sweeping across the expansive grounds. "Listen, Michael," Andrew said thoughtfully, "I appreciate you coming out on such short notice. I know the garden's a big job, especially after it's been neglected for a while. If you need anything while you're working, a drink, coffee, or even lunch, don't hesitate to ask. The chef will be happy to serve you." Touched by the considerate offer, Michael replied, "That's very kind of you, Mr. Blackwell. Thank you. I'll be sure to take a break if I need one." Andrew nodded, seemingly satisfied, and added, "Good man. Well, I'll leave you to it. I've got some work to attend to inside, but if you need anything, just ring the front bell." With a final smile and a wave, Andrew turned and made his way up the grand steps to the mansion's ornate front door. Michael watched him go, a sense of appreciation washing over him. In his years of working as a gardener for various wealthy clients, he had encountered his fair share of demanding and unpleasant employers. However, Andrew Blackwell had always been different, kind, considerate, and generous with both his money and his respect. The contrast was stark compared to yesterday's client, a penny-pinching taskmaster expecting miracles on a shoestring budget and offering nothing but criticism. Here at Blackwell Mansion, Michael felt valued and respected. The pay was excellent. $50 an hour was more than fair for his expertise, and the working conditions were superb. The vast gardens encircling the property provided a peaceful environment, far removed from the stresses of everyday life. As Michael worked his way to a new section of the garden, he noticed the wind picking up, rustling the leaves overhead. He glanced at the sky, noting the gathering clouds on the horizon. The weather report had mentioned the possibility of rain later in the day, and he made a mental note to quicken his pace. There was still so much to be done, and he wanted to make the most of the dry weather. Just as he was about to begin on a particularly overgrown rose bush, the sound of the front door opening caught his attention once more. Michael looked up, expecting to see perhaps one of the house staff or maybe Andrew heading out on an errand. Instead, what he saw made him pause. With his pruning shears suspended in midair, Andrew stood in the doorway, but the relaxed, friendly demeanor from earlier was gone. His face was now etched with worry, his eyes darting frantically across the grounds as they met Michael's gaze. "Michael, have you seen a little girl out here?" Andrew called out, his voice tight with barely concealed panic. "My daughter." Surprised by the question and the evident distress in Andrew's voice, Michael shook his head. "No, sir, I haven't seen anyone." "What does she look like?" Andrew hesitated for a moment, his eyes continuing to scan the area as if hoping the child would suddenly appear. "She's 7 years old, wearing a beanie." "You're absolutely sure you haven't seen her?" Michael furrowed his brow as he carefully tried to recall if he had glimpsed anyone matching that description. "I'm certain, Mr. Blackwell. I've been out here for almost an hour and haven't seen a soul besides yourself." Andrew's frown deepened, and Michael could see the worry etched into every line of his face. "All right, thank you, Michael. If you do see her, please let me know immediately. I'm going to check with the other staff members." With that, Andrew hurried back into the house, his movements jerky and urgent. Michael couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern. In all the months he had worked at the mansion, he had never seen or heard mention of a child living there. He wondered briefly whether perhaps the little girl wasn't allowed to play outside, or if she spent most of her time at other properties owned by the family. Shaking off his confusion, Michael returned to his work. Yet, his senses remained on high alert as he moved from plant to plant. He found himself constantly glancing around, half expecting to see a small figure darting between the bushes or hiding behind a tree. The once peaceful atmosphere of the garden had been replaced by an undercurrent of tension, and his mind wandered to his own experiences as a father. The memory of his own daughter, lost so many years ago to a rare form of leukemia, resurfaced unbidden. He recalled the panic and fear that would grip his heart whenever she was out of his sight for even a moment. The thought of Andrew's missing daughter had reignited those past traumas, making it difficult for him to refocus on his work. Time seemed to slow as Michael continued his tasks, each rustle of leaves and distant bird call drawing his attention. The garden, which had always been a place of peace and satisfaction, now felt charged with an unseen energy as he moved from one section to another. He found himself hoping fervently that the little girl would be found safe and sound. As the morning wore on and midday approached, Michael noticed the wind growing stronger and the sky becoming more overcast. The threat of rain loomed on the horizon, spurring him to work faster in an attempt to complete his tasks before the weather turned. Methodically, he trimmed and shaped the lush foliage with his experienced hands. The incident with Andrew and the missing girl still weighed heavily on Michael's mind. Approaching one of the mansion's large bay windows, he was so absorbed in his work that he did not immediately notice the figures standing just beyond the glass. It wasn't until a soft knock sounded that he looked up in surprise. There, standing at the window, was Andrew Blackwell holding a little girl in his arms. The child wore a pink beanie that completely covered her head and a long-sleeved Mickey Mouse pajama top paired with kid-sized jeans. Michael's heart leapt with relief. This must be the daughter Andrew had been searching for earlier. He watched as Andrew pointed toward him, seemingly explaining both the garden and Michael's work to the girl. However, as Michael observed the pair, he couldn't help but notice a stark contrast between Andrew's animated gestures and the little girl's demeanor. While Andrew appeared to be trying to engage and cheer her up, she remained expressionless, barely even glancing in Michael's direction despite his friendly wave. Her apparent disinterest and unhappiness struck him as odd. He wondered if perhaps she was feeling unwell. Her long sleeves in the afternoon suggested that she might have a fever or be battling the flu. As Michael pondered the situation, the little girl turned and walked away, with Andrew following close behind. Michael refocused on his work, keenly aware of the darkening sky, yet his thoughts kept drifting back to the girl's cold expression. Something about her demeanor, and the way she wore her beanie, stirred a painful memory of his own daughter, who had lost her battle with leukemia at just 2 years old. The weight of that loss, even after 25 years, suddenly felt fresh and raw. Michael's mind wandered back to those difficult days, recalling how it had all begun with a rash on his daughter's face. He remembered watching helplessly as it spread across her body, intensifying whenever she cried. The blood tests, the diagnosis, and the painful bone marrow extraction that left his little girl in agony even after the anesthesia wore off. All of these memories flooded back as he could still hear the oncologist's words, explaining how rare the condition was, affecting only 1 in a million children worldwide. The grueling chemotherapy sessions, the mounting medical bills, and the gut-wrenching realization that despite their best efforts, they were running out of both money and hope. All these painful memories overwhelmed him. Lost in his recollections, Michael didn't realize he had begun to cry until he heard the mansion's front door open. Quickly, he wiped away his tears with the hem of his blue uniform and forced himself to refocus on the task at hand. He reminded himself that those events were decades in the past, that his daughter was now at peace, watching over him from heaven. Blinking away the last of his tears, Michael caught sight of Andrew exiting the house once more. The millionaire walked past him with a smile, seemingly unaware of Michael's emotional moment. "I'm heading out for a bit to pick up a few things," Andrew called out. "My daughter is inside with her nanny. It looks like rain's coming. If it starts before you're done, feel free to take shelter in the staff area and grab a bite to eat." Michael was touched by the man's thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Blackwell. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Please be careful on the road," he replied as Andrew drove away in his luxury car. Michael then redoubled his efforts to complete his work before the weather worsened. Moving toward the back of the property, he found himself near another large window. This time, movement inside caught his eye. He looked up to see the little girl standing alone in what appeared to be a spacious living room. She stood motionless, her gaze fixed on Michael with the same unhappy, cold expression he had noticed earlier. Determined to lighten the mood, Michael smiled warmly and waved, calling out loud enough to be heard through the glass. "Hello there, I'm Michael Reed, the gardener. What's your name?" The girl hesitated for a moment before responding in a quiet voice that Michael could barely hear. "Lillian." Her expression remained unchanged. Michael's smile widened as he said, "That's a beautiful name, Lillian." Yet, the girl still remained silent. To lift her spirits, Michael decided to make a joke. He picked a few leaves from a nearby shrub and playfully perched them on his head, transforming himself into a comical bunny. He bounced around, wiggling his nose and flapping his arms as if they were big, floppy ears. To his delight, he caught a glimpse of Lillian's lips twitching into a smile for the first time, and her cold demeanor softened as a hint of joy flickered in her eyes. Encouraged by her reaction, Michael leaned closer in a warm and inviting voice and said, "How about you come outside and watch me create beautiful flowers in the garden? I could use a helper." He gestured toward the window, but Lillian's expression suddenly fell as she shook her head slowly. "I'm not allowed to go outside," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness and confusion over this strange rule. Gently, Michael probed further, "Why not, sweetheart?" Yet Lillian merely shook her head again, unwilling or unable to explain. Sensing her discomfort, Michael decided to change the subject. "You know, I used to have a daughter too. She was younger than you, and she was a quiet girl just like you. Her name was Juliana." The coincidence of the names stirred something deep within him, and he noticed a change in Lillian's demeanor, as if the shared syllables had forged an unexpected bond. Slowly and almost hesitantly, Lillian reached up and removed her beanie. Michael's heart sank as he saw her completely bald head, a sight all too familiar from his own daughter's battle with cancer. The telltale sign of chemotherapy brought a flood of emotions rushing back. Before Michael could offer any words of comfort or support, the sound of tires on gravel announced Andrew's return. Lillian's eyes widened with fear, and she quickly disappeared from view, leaving Michael standing alone in the garden, his mind reeling from what he had just witnessed. As Andrew pulled up and began unloading groceries from the trunk, Michael observed him with a mix of curiosity and concern. The sight of heavy bags piled high with fresh produce and snacks tugged at Michael's instincts as a gardener and stirred a deeper urge to help. Wiping his hands on his apron, he took a step closer, contemplating the burden that Andrew must carry as a father of a sick girl. "Hey, let me give you a hand with those," Michael offered, taking a few steps forward, ready to ease the weight from Andrew's shoulders. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder where the maids were. Wasn't there a staff to help him with such tasks? Andrew paused for a moment, looking up from the groceries with a polite smile. "Thank you, but I've got it covered," he replied, his voice steady and calm despite the underlying tone that suggested he preferred to manage things on his own. Michael nodded, acknowledging Andrew's wishes. As he stepped back, he caught a glimpse of the contents of one of the boxes still in the trunk. Among the collection of wigs, he noticed a bottle of over-the-counter hair growth serum. This sight puzzled him and brought to mind the specialized treatments his daughter's oncologist had mentioned years ago when they had halted her chemotherapy. Driven by a mix of concern and painful memories, Michael cautiously broached the subject. "Mr. Blackwell, I didn't realize your daughter was ill. Lillian showed me earlier when you were gone, and I just wanted to say I'm so sorry. I actually lost my own daughter to cancer, and I remember her oncologist mentioning a specific medicine for hair regrowth after chemo, minoxidil, I think it was called." Andrew's reaction was immediate and intense. His face flushed red with anger as he snapped, "That's none of your business. You have no right to speak to my daughter or involve yourself in our personal matters. If I catch you talking to her again, you're fired on the spot. Do you understand?" Taken aback by the sudden outburst, Michael stammered an apology, but Andrew did not listen. Absorbed his own anger, Andrew fully closed his car's trunk, leaving the box behind, and walked briskly toward the house. Michael stood there for a moment with swirling thoughts and a heavy sense of guilt, trying to reason in his mind that it was all his fault for giving unsolicited advice and stepping out of line. He should have understood how difficult it was to be a parent to a child with cancer. Having been sensitive during those times with his own daughter, Michael knew that this whole situation must have hit Andrew personally. He made a mental note to apologize to Andrew later, hoping that the tension would ease with time. Michael then headed back toward the garden, this time making his way directly to the backyard. Rounding the corner, he cast one last glance over his shoulder, wishing he could rewind the events. However, as he watched where the car was parked, he noticed Andrew emerging from the house again. Michael walked back to the car to retrieve the box he had left behind. Curiosity ignited within him as he continued toward the backyard, wondering why Andrew hadn't called his staff to assist him. Surely, a man of his means wouldn't have to handle everything on his own, especially in a business suit now at risk of being ruined. Was this his way of demonstrating dedication to his daughter, or was there something else behind it? As Michael worked in the back garden, the atmosphere shifted suddenly. Thunder rumbled ominously in the sky, and rain began to pour down in heavy sheets. Realizing he couldn't continue working in the downpour, yet unwilling to leave everything behind, especially the remnants of the plants he had already weeded and cut, Michael quickly made his way to the staff area, seeking shelter from the impending rain. The sudden change in weather mirrored the tumultuous thoughts swirling in his mind as he stepped into the warmth of the building. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and something savory cooking filled the air, a stark contrast to the damp chill outside. There, he was greeted by the chef, whose round face broke into a warm smile. "Ah, you must be the gardener. Perfect timing. You must be soaked to the bone. Come, sit down. I'll just put on a fresh pot of coffee, and lunch will be ready soon." Grateful for the distraction, Michael made his way to one of the chairs and sank into its soft cushions with a weary sigh. "Thanks, chef. That sounds wonderful," he said as the chef poured him a steaming mug of coffee. Michael glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already 1 p.m., and he hadn't realized how quickly time had passed. The rich aroma of the coffee filled his nostrils as he wrapped his hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into his chilled fingers. "Rough morning," the chef remarked, noticing Michael's pensive expression. Michael nodded slowly, taking a sip of his coffee before replying, "You could say that the garden needed a lot of work. His voice trailed off, uncertain how much to share about his interaction with Andrew and Lillian. Before Michael could decide whether to mention the girl, the door to the staff area opened again. A young woman entered, dressed in a simple but neat uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tidy bun, and her eyes met Michael's as she offered a small smile. "You must be Michael Reed, the gardener," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sophia, Lillian's nanny." Michael stood to shake her hand, noting the warmth in her grip. "Nice to meet you, Sophia," he replied. She then joined them at the table, accepting a mug of coffee from the chef with a grateful nod. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, with only the sound of the rain outside and the bustling kitchen as background noise. Michael's thoughts drifted back to Lillian, and before he could hold them back, he spoke. "Sophia, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is Lillian all right? I saw her earlier, and she seemed unwell." Sophia's expression shifted. A mix of concern and caution crossed her features. She glanced around as if checking to see if anyone else was listening before leaning closer to Michael. "Lillian has leukemia," she confided in a low voice. "She was diagnosed about 6 months ago. I think it was the all type." Michael's heart sank. Although acute lymphoblastic leukemia was more common than the rare JMML that had taken his own daughter, it was still a devastating diagnosis. "How is her treatment going?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sophia's brow furrowed as her fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug. "That's the strange thing," she said in a barely audible whisper. "For the first few months, she had regular chemotherapy sessions with a private doctor coming to the mansion. But lately, I haven't seen any medical professionals. Mr. Blackwell still gives her some medicine, but I'm not sure what it is, and honestly, she doesn't seem to be getting any better." A chill ran down Michael's spine despite the warmth of the kitchen. Something about the situation felt off, and alarm bells began ringing in his mind. He thought back to the over-the-counter hair growth serum he had spotted in Andrew's car. Typically, such serums were used after chemotherapy, not during it, and even then they were often prescription products rather than available over the counter. This realization contrasted sharply with the specialized treatments he remembered from his own daughter's illness, treatments that were tailored and carefully monitored by her oncologist. The pieces weren't fitting together, and a deep sense of unease settled over him. What is really going on with Andrew and his daughter? Michael wondered aloud, his thoughts racing. As he struggled to make sense of it all, a question surfaced in his mind. "What about her mother?" Michael asked, realizing he had never seen or heard any mention of Mrs. Blackwell. Sophia shrugged, a shadow passing over her face. "I've only been here for 5 months, replacing the previous nanny. I've never been asked about her mother. Mr. Blackwell is very strict about staff gossiping, especially about family matters." With that, their conversation drew to a close as the chef announced that lunch was ready. The aroma of a hearty beef stew filled the air, momentarily distracting Michael from his troubled thoughts. As they ate, the conversation turned to lighter topics, yet Michael's mind continued racing. The brief rain shower had passed, and he knew he needed to return to work in the garden. However, as he stepped back outside, the beauty of the manicured landscape seemed at odds with the unsettling mystery surrounding the little girl inside the mansion. The air was fresh and clean after the rain, the plants glistening with droplets, and under normal circumstances Michael would have reveled in the perfect conditions for gardening. But now, as he picked up his tools and resumed his work, he found himself constantly glancing back at the house, his thoughts filled with concern for Lillian. He couldn't shake the image of her bald head or the fear he had glimpsed in her eyes. The similarities to his own daughter's battle with cancer were too striking to ignore, and yet something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong. The gentle rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds provided a soothing backdrop to his work, but Michael found it increasingly difficult to lose himself in the familiar rhythms of gardening. Every movement from the house drew his attention, and suddenly a flash of movement caught his eye. Michael looked up to see Lillian sprinting toward him from the back door of the mansion, her face streaked with tears, with Sophia trailing behind her. The girl was clearly faster, and before Michael could respond, Lillian hurled herself into his arms, clinging to him with desperate intensity. "Whoa, Easy there, Michael said softly, his heart racing. He knew that if Andrew saw them like this, Michael would be fired on the spot. Yet the girl's distress was palpable, and he could not bring himself to push her away. What's wrong, sweetheart? You're not supposed to be outside, remember? Lillian looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and pain. Please, I need your help, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't feel good. My head hurts so much, and it's hard to breathe. It feels like there's water in my lungs when I try to take a deep breath. Michael's blood ran cold. He knelt down to her level and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. Slow down, honey. Tell me exactly what's happening. Lillian then took off her beanie, revealing her bare scalp, and explained, My head hurts all the time, and I'm always so tired. It hurts here when I breathe. I told Daddy, but he said it would go away on its own, but it's not going away, and I'm scared. A surge of anger and fear welled up in Michael. These symptoms were serious, potentially life-threatening, and he couldn't fathom how Andrew could ignore them. Lillian, we need to tell your dad right away. We'll go together, and I'll help you explain how bad you're feeling. He needs to call a doctor. But Lillian shook her head violently, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. No, please, he'll just put me back in the room. No doctors come anymore. It's been so long since anyone has come here. The desperation in her voice shattered Michael's heart. He glanced up at Sophia, recalling what she had told him earlier during lunch. In that moment, everything clicked into place, and a wave of growing horror washed over him as he realized that this was not a recent development. Lillian had been suffering like this for a while with no medical intervention. In a split-second decision, Michael knew he couldn't stand by and watch this child suffer when he had the power to do something about it. Okay, Lillian, listen to me, he said in a low, urgent voice. We're going to get you help, but we need to be quick and quiet because I need to get my phone from my van to make a call. Taking her small hand in his, Michael led her toward the front of the property where his van was parked. His mind raced as he formulated a plan. He needed to call for help, even though he understood that doing so might mean crossing a line. Andrew would likely fire him, or worse, report him for overstepping his boundaries. As they reached the van, Michael quickly retrieved his phone from his bag. Before he could dial, however, a furious shout rang out across the lawn. Andrew had emerged from the house, storming toward them with his face contorted with rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? Andrew bellowed, grabbing Lillian's arm roughly. I told you to stay away from her. Michael stood his ground, his protective instincts kicking in. Mr. Blackwell, please listen. Lillian is in pain. She needs medical attention immediately. But Andrew was not listening. He shoved Lillian toward the house, his grip on her arm visibly tight. You're fired, Michael. Get off my property now, before I call the police for trespassing and overstepping. In that moment, as Michael watched the fear in Lillian's eyes while she was dragged away, he knew he had to act. He raised his phone, his finger hovering over the emergency call button, and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell, but I'm the one calling the police. This child needs help, and if you won't provide it, I'll make sure someone does. Andrew's eyes froze, narrowing dangerously as he warned, Think very carefully about what you're doing, Michael. Some things in life are better left alone. This is one of them. Hang up that phone now, or you'll regret it. But Michael had made his decision. With a steady hand, he dialed 911, never taking his eyes off Andrew's face as he gave the dispatcher the address and a brief explanation of the situation. As he spoke, he watched Andrew's expression change from anger to something resembling fear. Without another word, Andrew turned and rushed back into the house, dragging a sobbing Lillian with him. Michael could hear the sound of doors slamming and muffled crying from inside as he waited for the police to arrive. His heart pounded. He knew he had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. He only hoped that he had done the right thing for Lillian's sake and in memory of his own daughter. The minutes dragged on agonizingly as Michael waited outside the mansion's imposing front door. The once peaceful garden felt eerily quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves and the soft patter of raindrops. Michael's eyes remained fixed on the house, his heart racing with worry for Lillian and uncertainty about what would happen next. Each passing second intensified his anxiety, and he couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away, leaving them vulnerable in an increasingly precarious situation. After what felt like an eternity, but was closer to 15 minutes, two police cruisers pulled up to the mansion's gates. Michael's heart leapt with a mixture of relief and apprehension as he watched the officers approach. However, their demeanor was not what he had expected or hoped for. "Sir, are you the one who called the police?" one officer asked. "Yes, I am, officer," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "And who are you?" "My name is Michael Reed. I was a gardener at Blackwell Mansion, but the man just fired me for trying to save his daughter. You see, his daughter, Lillian Blackwell, is known to be sick. Everyone here knows Mr. Blackwell and his family." The officer interjected in a brusque, authoritative tone. Michael felt a mix of relief and frustration. At least they understood the gravity of the situation, but he could sense that the officer might not be ready to fully listen to his concerns. "Yes, officer. You see, the daughter told me she was sick and was being denied medical care," Michael continued. Before he could say more, one of the officers cut him off. "Sir, you mentioned you were fired. Why are you still here? We need you to step outside the property. Staying here constitutes trespassing." Michael's heart sank as the officer's words hit him. He opened his mouth to protest, to tell them they were missing the point, but the authority in the officer's voice made it clear that there was no room for argument. Michael felt a surge of frustration, but forced himself to remain calm. "Officers, please, you don't understand. I'm not the one who's done wrong here. There's a child in danger inside that house who needs immediate medical attention, and her father is denying it." The second officer held up a hand, cutting him off. "We'll investigate your claims, sir, but for now you need to wait outside this gate. We can't have you interfering with our work." Reluctantly, Michael stepped beyond the property line, his heart heavy with worry. He watched anxiously as the officers approached the front door, noting how quickly Andrew answered their knock. From his vantage point, Michael couldn't hear the conversation, but he observed intently, trying to glean any information from their body language and expressions. To his surprise and growing concern, the interaction seemed cordial. Andrew's demeanor appeared calm and collected, a far cry from the enraged man Michael had confronted earlier. After a brief exchange, Andrew stepped aside, allowing the police to enter the house. Minutes that felt like hours passed as Michael paced back and forth along the sidewalk, his mind conjuring increasingly worrisome scenarios. What if they didn't believe Lillian? What if Andrew managed to convince them that everything was fine? Just as Michael was about to call out to the officers, the front door opened again. What he saw next made his blood run cold. The officers emerged laughing and chatting amicably with Andrew as they descended the front steps. Michael caught a glimpse of one officer discreetly tucking an envelope into his pocket. Disbelief and anger surged through Michael as the officers approached him. Before he could speak, one of them addressed him curtly. "Sir, we've investigated the situation and everything appears to be in order. The child is fine and has denied any mistreatment. This seems to be a misunderstanding." Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's impossible," he exclaimed, his voice rising with desperation. "Did you even examine her? Did you speak to her alone? She needs medical attention." The second officer's expression hardened. "Mr. Reed, we've done our job. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing here. If you continue to make these accusations, we'll have no choice but to arrest you for false reporting and harassment." As the reality of the situation sank in, Michael felt a wave of despair wash over him. The system that was supposed to protect the vulnerable had failed spectacularly. Andrew had somehow managed to buy his way out of trouble, leaving Lillian trapped and suffering. The officers returned to their vehicles, and Michael stood alone outside the gate, feeling helpless and defeated as he watched them drive away. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed a grave injustice. The image of Lillian's frightened, pained face burned into his mind. Michael knew he couldn't simply walk away now. He had come too far and seen too much. But what could he do against the combined forces of wealth, corruption, and indifference? Michael returned to his van parked just outside the mansion's gates, his mind swirling with emotions and half-formed plans on how to help the girl. Every option he considered seemed to leave him vulnerable and embroiled in controversy. The weight of what he had witnessed, the apparent corruption of the police, Andrew's menacing behavior, and most of all Lillian's desperate plea for help, pressed heavily upon him. He sat behind the steering wheel, gripping it tightly as he tried to sort through his thoughts. What could he do? Calling for help had only made things worse, and he felt powerless to change Lillian's fate. As he contemplated his next move, a sudden realization struck him. His gardening tools were still in the backyard. These tools were expensive, and the thought of having to replace them only added to his frustration. Despite the risk, he decided he needed to retrieve them cautiously. Scanning the property and seeing no sign of Andrew or the police, Michael made a split-second decision with surprising agility for a man his age. He vaulted over the fence and made his way stealthily toward the backyard, the damp grass muffling his footsteps as he crept along the side of the house. His heart pounded in his chest as he rounded the corner of the mansion. Then, on the indoor terrace, he spotted Lillian again, this time with Sophia, her nanny, and both were pressed against the window. Lillian's face was tear-stained, and even Sophia looked deeply concerned and scared. Michael's heart clenched at the sight. He knew he couldn't just leave them there. Determined to save her, even if it meant taking an unusual and dangerous route, Michael approached the mansion window and gestured urgently to Sophia. "Can you open it?" Sophia shook her head, her eyes wide with fear, and mimed turning a key, indicating that the window was locked. Frustration and determination warred within Michael as he scanned his surroundings. His gaze landed on a sizable rock nestled among the flower beds. Without a moment's hesitation, he picked it up and held it aloft, locking eyes with Sophia, who looked taken aback and shook her head vigorously in protest. Michael understood that what he was about to do was reckless and even dangerous. He could easily end up in jail, but the urgency of the moment outweighed his fears. The look on Lillian's face echoed too closely to that of his own daughter, and in that instant all he could see was her image. He couldn't ignore the connection he felt or the overwhelming need to do something to save the girl from the pain his daughter had once endured. Taking a deep breath, Michael steeled himself for a leap of faith, clinging to the hope that it would lead to a positive outcome. Nodding at Sophia, who, with understanding in her eyes, realized that Michael was fully committed to his plan, she swiftly guided Lillian away from the window and stepped back herself. It was evident that Sophia recognized the seriousness of the situation and decided to lend her support. With all his might, Michael hurled the rock at the window. The sound of shattering glass was deafening in the quiet afternoon. Wasting no time, he cleared away the remaining shards and reached for Lillian. "Come on, sweetheart," he urged in a low, urgent voice. "We need to go now." Lillian did not hesitate. She extended her arm, and Michael quickly reached through the broken window to lift her up. Just as he secured her, Sophia appeared behind them, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "I can't come with you," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "But please, take her, keep her safe." Michael nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sophia. We'll get her the help she needs." With Lillian safely in his arms, Michael raced back toward the front of the property. His heart pounded in his chest with every rustle of leaves, fearing discovery. As they reached the fence, he gently set Lillian down. "The gate is locked, so I'm going to lift you over," he explained softly. "Okay," Lillian replied in a brave, trembling voice. Michael hoisted her up and over the fence, then quickly scrambled over himself. In moments, they were both safely on the other side. Wasting no time, Michael scooped Lillian up again and sprinted to his van. He buckled her into the passenger seat, his hands shaking with adrenaline as he slid behind the wheel. Reality crashed over him. He had just committed what could be seen as a serious crime, kidnapping in the eyes of the law, but looking at Lillian's pale, frightened face, he knew he had made the right choice. Starting the engine, Michael drove several hundred meters down the road before pulling over. He needed to think and plan their next move carefully. "Lillian," he said gently, turning to her, I'm going to call the police again. This time I'll ask for their supervisor. We're going to make sure they listen." Lillian nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Michael took a deep breath and dialed 911 once more. "This is an emergency," he said as soon as the dispatcher answered. "I need to speak to a police supervisor immediately. The officers who responded to my earlier call were corrupt. There's a child in danger, and we need help now." As he spoke, Michael's resolve strengthened. He knew the risks he was taking and that if he were wrong about his suspicions, he could face severe legal consequences. But leaving Lillian in that house, suffering and neglected, was unthinkable. "Please hurry," he urged the dispatcher. "We'll be waiting right here." When the call ended, Michael turned to Lillian, offering what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "It's going to be okay. We're going to get you the help you need. I promise." As they sat together in the van, waiting for the police to arrive, Michael felt a fierce protectiveness wash over him. Whatever happened next, he vowed to do everything in his power to keep this child safe. The memory of his own daughter, lost so many years ago, fueled his determination. This time, he wouldn't fail. He would make a difference. The tense silence in the van was suddenly broken by the wail of approaching sirens. Within minutes, several patrol cars pulled up, their lights flashing. Michael's heart raced as he saw an unmarked vehicle arrive, most likely the supervisor he had demanded. "Okay, Lillian," he said softly, turning to the frightened girl beside him. "The police are here to help us. I need you to be brave and tell them everything about how you've been feeling and about the lack of medical care. Can you do that for me?" Lillian nodded, her small hand gripping his tightly. "I'm scared," she whispered. Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I know, sweetheart, but I'll be right here with you. You're not alone anymore." As they exited the van, they were immediately surrounded by officers. A stern-looking woman in her late 40s approached them. "I'm Detective Samantha Clark," she introduced herself. "Mr. Reed, I understand you have some serious allegations to make, but first I need you to step away from the child." Michael hesitated, reluctant to leave Lillian's side. "Please, you need to listen to her. She needs medical attention immediately." Detective Clark nodded, her expression softening slightly as she looked at Lillian. "We'll take care of her, sir, but for now I need you to wait in your van while we speak with the girl." Reluctantly, Michael complied, watching anxiously from the van as Detective Clark knelt down to speak with Lillian. He could see the girl's lips moving and her small hands gesturing as she spoke. The detective's face grew increasingly grave as she listened. After what felt like an eternity, Detective Clark approached the van. "Mr. Reed, I need you to tell me everything you know from the beginning." Taking a deep breath, Michael launched into his account, detailing his work at the mansion, his observations of Lillian, his conversations with Sophia, and the confrontations with Andrew. As he spoke, he could see Detective Clark's expression change from skepticism to concern. When he finished, she was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Mr. Reed," she said finally, in a serious tone, "based on what you've told me and what the child has said, we have enough to investigate further. However, I must warn you that taking the child from the property, regardless of your intentions, was illegal. You could be facing serious charges." Michael nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I understand, but I couldn't leave her there. Not when I knew she needed medical care." Detective Clark considered his words before continuing. "We're going to need to question everyone involved. The staff at the mansion, including the nanny you mentioned, and, of course, Mr. Blackwell himself." As if on cue, more sirens blared in the distance. Child Protective Services and a medical team have been called. She explained, "We're taking this matter very seriously, Mr. Reed. My team and I are now entering the mansion to find Mr. Blackwell and conduct further investigations." Then, adding gravely, "I regret to say this, but I must warn you, you're up against a powerful man. There's a possibility that this entire situation could turn against you because of your actions in taking the child." Michael's voice was barely above a whisper as he asked, "What happens now?" "Mr. Blackwell is in custody," Detective Clark replied. "We're charging him with child endangerment and neglect. There will likely be more charges as we uncover the full extent of his actions. possibly including an investigation into Mrs. Blackwell's death. Michael remembered fragments of conversation he had overheard and asked about Lillian's mother. "Can I see her?" he pleaded. Detective Clark hesitated before nodding. "I think that can be arranged. She's been asking for you. But first, there's something else we need to discuss." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mr. Reed, while your actions were undoubtedly well-intentioned, taking Lillian from the property was technically kidnapping. Under normal circumstances, you'd be facing serious charges." Michael's heart sank, but before he could speak further, Detective Clark continued. "Given the extraordinary circumstances and your full cooperation, we're inclined to be lenient. We will need you to sign a statement explaining your actions, but we won't be pressing charges at this time." A wave of relief washed over Michael, and tears prickled at the corners of his eyes as he managed to say, "Thank you. I just couldn't leave her there, not when I knew she was suffering." After signing the necessary paperwork, Detective Clark led Michael out of the tent. The late afternoon air felt cool on his skin as they walked toward a waiting police car. Michael saw Sophia being escorted to another vehicle. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a nod of gratitude, which she returned with a small, sad smile. "We'll be questioning MS. Sophia thoroughly," Detective Clark explained as they got into the car. "Her testimony will be crucial in building our case." As they drove toward the hospital, Michael's mind raced with everything that had transpired. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily upon him. Yet underneath it all, he felt a renewed sense of purpose that he had not felt in years. When they arrived at the hospital, a Child Protective Services worker named Laura Stevens greeted them in the lobby. "Mr. Reed," she said warmly, "Lillian has been asking for you. She's just finished her initial examinations, and the doctors are reviewing her case. Would you like to see her?" Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion, as they walked toward Lillian's room. In the room, Laura explained softly, "She's going to need extensive treatment, but the doctors are optimistic that with proper care, she still has a good chance of recovery." As they entered the room, Michael's eyes immediately found Lillian. She looked small and fragile in the large hospital bed, but her face lit up when she saw him. "Michael," she called out weakly yet filled with relief. Michael moved to her bedside, gently taking her hand in his. "Hey there, brave girl," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" Lillian managed a small smile and whispered, "The doctor said they're going to make me better. Is it true? Can I really get better now?" Tears welled in Michael's eyes as he reassured her. "Yes, sweetheart. You're going to get all the help you need, I promise." Sitting by her side, Michael made a silent vow that he would be there for her throughout her treatment, during the legal proceedings, and beyond. Although he couldn't change the past or bring back his own daughter, he knew he could still make a difference in this child's life. Outside the room, Detective Clark and Laura Stevens watched the tender scene unfold. "We'll need to find her family," Laura mused softly. "Her grandparents, perhaps?" Detective Clark nodded grimly. "We're working on it. In the meantime, it seems she has found a guardian angel in you, Mr. Reed." As the evening deepened outside the hospital windows, Michael remained by Lillian's side, a beacon of hope and protection in the storm she had weathered for so long. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, Michael felt a sense of purpose he had long thought lost. In saving Lillian, he had also, in a way, saved a part of himself. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories like this one. Share this video with your friends and family, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for our next video, and check out others you might have missed. See you next time.